Welcome to Gina's Table. I am so glad that you have joined us this week, and I have a very special guest, my favorite person to be at the table with, and that is Jason, who is my best friend, my partner in crime, and we have been married 101 years. Oh, not quite. On Monday, March 18th, we will be married how many years?
29 years.
29 years. He is correct. And so on this episode, we wanted to talk about marriage, our story a little bit, and then we asked people to send in questions, and we're going to try to get to as many of those as we can. Some of them are like they're a whole episode worth of questions. But anyway, so we're going to start with Jason and I's story, and I found some really great little fun things. This is like Jason and I in our beginning. This is when we were 16 and 17. Aren't we so cute? We were very lovely Bible school children. And then this is our wedding day. And 29 years, you and me. So a lot of memories, a lot of things. And so Jason, let's talk a little bit about getting married at 18 and 19. And what were we thinking?
We obviously have had to talk about this with the kids and stuff, because to think that at our children's age now, we were done having children. So at our youngest. And so that's been kind of interesting to navigate, and obviously isn't recommended for everyone. I think it was right for us. I think for a lot of reasons, we both had some things in our past that we had to kind of deal with, and I think it helped us grow up quickly, maybe is the way. And so we were very much in let's grow up together mode, and we knew some really big rocks of what we wanted that to look like, and I think looking back on it now, a lot of those have stayed intact, and others got kind of broken up a little bit and reshaped, or maybe thrown out altogether just because they were really great ideals, but not realistic.
I think one of our biggest goals when we got married, and that we had talked about even before we got married at 18 and 19, was we wanted to replant our family tree. We wanted our family tree to look different than either of our families that we came from looked like. And so that was really, really important to us. And I think how it worked was a mystery to both of us.
Yeah, I think looking back, it's like, how exactly within just a little bit of the Reader's Digest version, I guess, within a few weeks after we were married, we found out we were expecting Brooklyn. So it was like immediately going from, from husband and wife to now parents, and how are we going to parent our child? And we'd kind of talked through that obviously before we got married, which recommendation, definitely do that. Don't get surprised by, its styles and what's important. That's big rocks. Right. But we had talked through that, and so we were as ready as we could be. I just look back and it's ridiculous.
Right. But we did have a great 5-year plan though.
We did.
When we got married, and that was to be married 5 years, and then have 2 kids 2 years apart. Instead, on our 5th wedding anniversary, we were a month and a half away from having our 4th child. And so we'd been married 7 weeks, and we found out we were 4 weeks pregnant with Brooklyn, and then we proceeded to have 4 children in 4 years and 4 months. Yeah. That was not our plan.
Not planned at all.
And not only was it not our plan, but it wasn't like everything went perfectly with that. And so that caused a whole new level of tension and growing up, as we had 4 preemies and were in the NICU and had life and death decisions to make. And so we really did grow up a lot in that first 5 years.
Yeah, I think that was probably, I don't know if the first 5 or the second 5 are the hardest. There was just a lot going on physically. There was a lot going on financially. We had all of the ingredients of what typically makes up failed marriages.
Right. So the top 3 things that take out marriages are finances, infidelity, and in-law issues. And we were facing all but one of those. There wasn't any infidelity, but it was really hard those first few years. And I know that Jason has talked about, there came a time where he wasn't sure that first 10 years that we were going to make it. And that shifted to...
Yeah, after that, at some point in time in there, I don't really remember. It wasn't like a thing that happened, or, I've been asked and I've thought a lot about what was it that kind of moved the needle from that, I'm not sure, to just, of course, there's all this history and everything. And I think part of it was maybe growing up and maturing a little bit and realizing that the world's not about you and me. So, just kind of working through that, and that the world doesn't revolve around us, and that we were about something bigger. And I think that became more and more evident, in that time frame as well, that what we were about, what we were trying to do here, was something that neither one of us could do on our own.
Right.
And really, we couldn't do it even on our own together.
Right.
Like it was something much bigger than that.
Right. And I really think that is, in the end, if I look over the last 29 years, that we've had this commitment to something bigger than either of us. And while at times we couldn't define that, we knew we had a strong faith, and but even when that was shaky, we knew that we were in this together. And I think I should say, disclaimer, we are not perfect. We do not have a perfect marriage. We do not have a perfect family. We don't have perfect children. But we have fought hard to be where we are today.
Yeah,
and
that's a good way to put it in that. It didn't just accidentally happen.
Right.
We didn't just wake up one day and be 10 or 15 or now 29 years in and go, wow, we have a good marriage.
And there were times that we fought against each other instead of for each other. And I think maybe over the years that has shifted, especially probably in the last few years, where we can really fight, although we do still fight, but we fight for each other more than we fight against each other. And Jason came into the marriage and he was highly logical, and I was very emotional, 0 to 60 pretty quick. And he was the only person I knew that could remove absolutely all emotion from every circumstance and just look at it logically. And so we've evened each other out quite a bit in the last 29 years.
I've tried to stop saying, could you just remove yourself from the situation and look at it above it? That
doesn't go very
didn't
well.
go very well. Yeah.
So as you can imagine, there's been lots of transitions that we've had to navigate in the last 29 years. And one of the questions that we actually got asked to talk about was, how do life transition impact our marriage and impact everybody's marriage? And as I was trying to think of those big transitions, right? We went from teenagers who were newly married very quickly to babies with health issues, and then that transitioned into the school days and high school and teenagers. And also along that way came big career changes. I went from being a stay-at-home mom to full-time ministry, and that was a huge shift. And that was when our youngest was in second grade. We've moved across the country twice. We've had job changes, we've been empty nesters, we've had everybody move back in with us, and now we're empty nesters again. And so what would you say, in your opinion, has been the biggest transition that we've had, and what did we do to kind of help our marriage or stay connected?
I don't know about the biggest. I think there were a few significant changes, and I was thinking of when you went full-time at a church. That was kind of like a big, because your focus had been on the kids at home, which is a full-time job, and all the respect and appreciation there. But went from that to being more of this, like now our nights and weekends had a lot of church activities in them, with her being full-time on staff. And so that created almost a new lifestyle for us. And at the time I was traveling quite a bit still, or in that phase. And so work was difficult and money was tight, and we were doing everything we could just to keep the wheels on the thing. It was going fast. The kids at that point would have been, just getting to the really formative years of junior high, middle school, and the late grade school years. And so it was just a lot of transition. There was a lot of stress on us.
I think one of the ways
that was big.
That was huge. And I think one of the ways we tried to navigate that was ministry for us was a family event. And it wasn't just me serving a church, it was all of us serving a church and really bringing the kids along in that. And I think that's how we probably were able to stay as connected as we were, even though there was some really tense times in there. But I think it also, one of the things that Jason and I did was we started a nonprofit called Forever Years Ministries that did marriage retreats and tried to bring couples together at least once a year to really focus on each other. We're still big fans of dating your spouse after you're married, making sure that you make time in your life for each other so that when your kids are gone, you don't wake up and, oh, who are you? And you can do that with your kids around, and we did that. But we also made sure that we did that at times when our kids weren't around, and that really helped us kind of stay grounded in that time. But
yeah, for sure. But
we've had some pretty big transitions. I would say for me, probably the transition that we're in now of empty nesters and figuring out who I want to be when I grow up. And Jason really on the accelerator of his career, and things are just snapping and going and quickly moving for him, and there's no kids here. There's nobody for me to take care of. That's not true. I'm still taking care of Jason, but it's just a different shift. And so what are the things that Jason and I have discovered over the last 3 years, and it's really helping us stay connected, as we like to cook together. And so sometimes that goes really well. Other times it's my kitchen and he needs to move. Is that fair?
Yeah, but it has been fun, and we've kind of explored through that, different flavors, different foods that we wouldn't have eaten before, certainly that we wouldn't have put together, and that's been fun.
Right.
And I was going to say, we were talking about this earlier, but I think the tendency is, and just to think about it, the transition that you're in always feels like the biggest.
Right. That's true.
I think it always feels like the most significant.
Right.
And then we get on the other side of it and we look back and we can have a little bit of perspective to understand, maybe that wasn't as big a transition, it just felt like it in the moment.
Right. But I think, again, as I look at all these, what grounds us is that we're committed to something bigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Than either of us. We are committed to this life that we started together when we were young and dumb at 18 and 19 and knew nothing, even though we thought we knew some things, to end our life together. This really is our commitment to one another, and it hasn't come without challenges, and we also have had to give each other room to grow and be who we are becoming. I think Jason has said, and I'm sure I'll talk about this in other podcasts, but he's been married to 3 different Ginas. And that's probably really true as I have grown and dealt with some things in my life and discovered who I was and how God created me to be. And so I think if I were talking to a newlywed couple, someone who's just gotten married, I would say you need to make room for who you are becoming, because who you are today probably won't be who you are 10 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now. And so I've just been married to one Jason. He's been pretty,
I don't know about that. I think we all change, right? Everybody changes, but to Gina's point, there are traumatic events, and there are life things that we all go through that are different. And so like we have to make room for that too. I think that's, if we were talking about, that's probably the most significant transitions, is because when you come out of those intense times, it can be the thing that makes you into that different type of, not a different person, but a different set of priorities and a different set of like what's big to you. And so like as you work through that, those are really big changes. And if you don't make room for that, it's hard to make room for that,
right.
because that's not what you signed up for. But it is. It's like,
it really is. You sign up for all of
the whole
thing,
yeah.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
All of it.
Which kind of segues into another question that we got on Facebook, and it was talking about, the question is, I read a book recently where a college president of a Christian university shared that students on campus lacked confidence in marriage because they often saw their Christian parents in conflict. How do you work at repairing and resolving conflict? Wow, this is huge. And it's one of the things that really brought me to talk about Gina's table. I think that this is a bigger issue than just marriage. I think this is in most relationships and in our culture. People do not know how to resolve conflict. That being said, early on in our marriage, we didn't know how to resolve conflict. As I said, I would go 0 to 60 pretty quick, and he could remove the emotion from the room and I would want to kill him. But I didn't want to go to jail, and we had all these kids, so I let him live. But as we have grown, and something that I think our kids would tell you as well, we really worked on conflict resolution. If there was a conflict, we are quick to point that out, quick to say, I'm sorry. When our kids were going through conflict with people in school or friend groups or church or whatever, we'd say, hey, I think you should plan a coffee date. We'll take you on that coffee date, or whatever, so that you can work through whatever the conflict is. That didn't mean that working through the conflict made you best friends, but it did mean that you were going to have a healthy conversation with someone about conflict. And in marriage, like I said, we haven't always done that well. I think we do that fairly well now.
I think leaning into sometimes just, and it's like understanding the timing of it too, like, that there are certain times that are good to talk about. And I think that one of the best things that I ever was told or read was about like understanding when is the right time. Like if you can sense this is not the right time, then when can we plan a time? Right. And that's been helpful because, your personality is more like, let's go right now. And sometimes I need to think about it. Well, now as we've grown, sometimes you need to think about it. And you're not ready to have that conversation, even though I am. And I'm going like, what? She's not ready? She's always been ready to go.
Right.
So, just adapting and understanding that.
Right. And
but not forgetting, I think part of it is staying real and keeping it real. Right. And not just like brushing it aside to be dealt with later, or you think the other person forgot about it.
Right. I think so often we would rather walk away from a relationship than have the hard conversation. I think that's why the divorce rate is really high. I think that's why friendships have seasons that are really good, and then there's something that comes and there's this conflict, and instead of doing the hard work, and it is hard work to resolve conflict, we tend to run the other way. And I have not always done that perfectly. I can think of relationships now that I know I could have worked harder on. But I think this is more than just a marriage problem or a church problem. This is a culture problem. Yeah, and so definitely are going to talk more about conflict resolution and how we work on it. I hope to bring in some other voices to the table around that. But for Jason and I, we really worked hard with our kids because we're replanting a family tree. We want them to be, I tell each other, I have two goals for them two desires for them and stuff, that they love Jesus and they love each other. And so how are you going to do that? You're gonna work through conflict.
Yeah.
And
the whole idea of replanting a family tree is probably its own episode.
It is.
Probably a couple of them.
Yes.
But I mean, just staying committed to that big idea,
Right.
that again, that knew how to work through conflict.
Right.
And so arming our kids to do that.
Right.
So
one of the other questions we got is kind of a tricky one, and it was talking about addiction in marriage and when is it okay to walk away, and that's just a tricky question, and so I'm going to answer it how I
let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
I know this was the way it was asked, but just because I think it's something we've been asked a lot over the years. When is it okay to walk away?
Right. So here's what I tell people in marriages, and again, we've worked with a lot of marriages throughout the last few years, but if you are in harm, if you are being beaten, if you and sometimes we think harm only comes in physical, but if you are being verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically abused, you need to protect yourself and your family, your kids, if there's kids involved. Sometimes when there's an addiction, you can work, if they're willing to get the help and you can work through that, then you can really see good results on the other side of that. But if there's just a constant, and usually addiction and abuse go hand in hand, not always, so it's a tricky thing. But if you're in danger, you need to walk away. If you or your children are being hurt, you need to find a safe place.
You need to be in a safe place.
You need to be in a safe place.
In order to have a chance at reconciling anything.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
have to be safe in that during that time.
Absolutely. And again, this kind of goes back to the conflict. Just because you work through conflict doesn't mean that you have a healthy, great relationship and you stay together. It means that you work through conflict in a healthy way so that you can both move forward in healthy ways. And so again, this is, and not knowing all of the situations and anyone who might be listening, I would just say, if you're in harm's way, you need to be someplace safe. And if there's an addiction, then please seek help. And there's lots of resources out there.
Yeah, and I wish the church was more open about this. Like, I think just in general, we've talked a lot about this, but I think this is an area where that's just real. Like, it's where people live, and having the opportunity to like really support each other in a positive direction. It's what we tried to do with the marriage ministry, was to put it in a position where you knew where the support was coming from. Right. The worldview that the support was there. Right. So I think that's huge in this all as well, because in these times, if you do make that decision to go somewhere where you're safe, then you can be ostracized from, and people in the church end up picking sides and all that, and it just gets messy instead of just really coming along and supporting. So try to be supportive. If you're not dealing with this, but you know someone who is, try to be supportive. Right. To them. One
of the other questions, and I had that actually a couple down, though maybe goes better here, is, what do we do in a polished church culture that is scarce in resources and scarce in accountability and openness about brokenness? And again, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the table is that we would get really real. And the church has come a long way in a lot of areas, and has also been
well, it's messy and broken.
It's messy and broken.
I mean, let's face it, it's made up of us, and we're messy and broken. So why do we have different expectations of an organized body? So I could go on and we were talking about this earlier, polished church culture. Can't say that very quick. I could go for hours on that. Yeah. But I don't think the cross that Jesus died on was polished. I'll just leave it at that. And people are messy. And so if you can't be real about your brokenness in church in a safe place, then, that's something that requires a lot of self-evaluation. Obviously, there's times and places and appropriateness and all of that, but I mean, you've got to have people that you can be real with.
Right, and I think that's where I would bring it back to who is around your table. So if this is your question, if you're asking, what do I do? I have things going on. Our marriage is falling apart. There is addiction. There is abuse. There is, you fill in the blank. There's a lack of commitment to something bigger than ourselves. And I feel like the church is polished and we're not real about accountability and openness and brokenness. Then who's around your table? Find that table. Find people that you can be real with. I think for Jason and I, there have been couples along the way that we have been very, very real, and there's been no secrets, and we have talked about everything from sex and money and temptations and kids and jobs that ground us. And so I, as a pastor once in my life, or a long time in my life, I'm sorry that the church where you feel that you can't be real and open, and I wish it was different. And so that is really, I'm passionate about it. I just am, which is why I want everybody to be around a table. And again, there's so many questions here. We're not going to get to all of them tonight because time is coming to an end here. But we will come back to some of them that we didn't touch on. So if you sent in a question and we didn't touch on it tonight, don't worry. Jason loves to be on the podcast with me.
Yeah.
So he's going to come back.
I'm more of a behind the scenes guy, really.
He's going to come back and we will be able to talk more about that. Okay, so closing remarks, Jay. What would you like to leave Gina's table today with?
So I think just a follow up from that question, and like I said, I could go for, trust me, a long time on polished church culture, but I think that you can't pretend in this. Like the biggest way to make sure your marriage falls apart is just to pretend that it's all good, to pretend that you're doing the right things and ignore reality. And I think that's what happens all the time. We're going to pretend that the relationship around us with other people is good and not recognize that, no, there's real faults in it that have hurt people. And I mean, if they're not addressed, they're not going to be fixed. You can't pretend they're not there. And eventually, over time, it comes out and it falls down. And so whether it's a marriage, whether it's another type of relationship, be real. Like, let's just get to the real heart of it. It's about being real. Right. So if I'm passionate about anything, that's probably one of the things it is.
He will be back. So about us, let's end with something about us. If you could redo one thing, what would you redo?
Okay, I'll think about it while you tell me what you would redo.
What I would redo is I would elope. I would not have a wedding because that was a disaster.
That didn't go well.
That didn't go well. So I would elope. That's what I would redo. What would you redo?
That's a good one.
I know. Thank you.
Oh man. There's probably several things. I don't know, but at the end of it, it's kind of like I'd do it all over again. I mean, you know.
So
here we are.
What's your favorite thing about being married?
I think just the companionship and the partnership of it. Like, you know, partner in crime. We love discovering and finding new places and new foods and new restaurants and kind of foodies. And so exploring DC, we've been all over the Northeast, into the crooks and crannies of New York and Boston and DC, Philadelphia, all kind of up through there. That was a lot of fun, those 7 years we were in the Northeast.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite thing about being married is I'm absolutely married to my best friend. And I can't imagine life without Jason. And so I'm super glad that over 30 years ago, he chose me. And so that is kind of the story of us in a nutshell, with a few of your questions about marriage. We can't wait to see what all happens around your table. If you have more questions, please let us know. But that is going to conclude this episode of Gina's Table, and I hope that you join us next week.